So in this video, we're going to walk you through how to conduct a group discussion. And for this purpose, I'm only going to do this with a small group discussion because I don't have all 50 of my students willing to join me during spring break. But fortunately, I had these wonderful students who are willing to jump on and kind of demonstrate this tool. So I want to kind of walk through how you go about managing a group discussion in a class if you're doing more of a case-based teaching kind of class or something like that. And the first thing I would note is as soon as we get into the class, set guidelines with the students about how to use this tool, because as we've learned this tool, the students are going to need to learn how to use it too. So the first thing I would say is, hey everybody, can everybody hear me? Thumbs up. Cool. If you're having trouble hearing me, make sure that you've looked at the bottom left-hand corner of your menu, in your Zoom menu. There is a mute button there, and you can unmute yourself. For now, I'm going to have you all auto-muted. Please keep your camera on. If you don't feel comfortable with that, put an icon on your profile, and you can have just a picture of you. But that would be helpful as I'm looking through and able to see you all. The next thing I would recommend all my students do is say, hey everybody, in your Zoom menu, make sure you click on the participants window and make sure you click on the chat window. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to mute all of you, and I'm going to, let's see here, allow participants to unmute themselves. So I'm going to allow students to unmute themselves. I'm going to assume that this will be manageable. And if it doesn't become manageable, then I will just go back and remute them all, and I will undo this option, which basically won't allow students to unmute themselves. And this may be good, I think, when you're dealing with classes really, really large, whatever you define really large to be. If I'm teaching a class of 350, I'm probably not going to give the power to unmute to people, because all it takes is 1% of them to do it, and you've got 3.5 people just chattering. So I'm gonna in this case, I'm gonna allow participants to unmute themselves because it's a small number. Now that they're all in here, this is where we can start to have a discussion. So let's say I'm walking through a case, and and I want students to interact with me. What I would try out and try things and see how they work. And if they don't work, abandon them, or try to fix what's not working. But over in the right-hand side, does everybody see who's participating in this class? And can everybody see the chat window? So what I would say is, when we start to have this discussion, let's say, hey, look what's happening in the news today. Today our class is about business continuity planning and how you set together a disaster recovery plan in case you have to shut down all operations at your organization and move to an online model. Very timely discussion around this. So we could say, hey, does anybody have any thoughts on this case they want to share? So one of you could demonstrate, maybe like, is it easy and clear to, yeah, so Matt's raising his hand. So I would notice Matt's raising his hand. Now I can lower his hand, and I can unmute him, and there are some other options here that I can do. Now real quick, if you notice that Sastry is on the bottom, if Sastry raises his hand, he's gonna jump up in the list. So Sastry, go ahead and raise your hand for a second. Not physically, sorry. Raise your digital hand. That's a good point. We'll actually talk about the physical raising of hands too. So over in your participant menu, there should be a button that allows you to raise your hand. Perfect. Now you'll notice as soon as that happened, Sastry's hand went up and he jumped to the top of the list. Now what this means is Matt raised his hand first. And so because he's at the top of my participant list, I know that he's the first one who raised his hand. So the first thing I'll do is I'll just lower his hand and I will unmute Matt. It looks like he jumped down to the bottom of the list when I unraised his hand. So maybe we want to unmute him first and then lower his hand. Hey Matt, can you just test your vocal out? Is it working?
Yeah, I just didn't know what a business continuity plan is.
Absolutely. Did you do the reading, Matt?
Absolutely not.
Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and mute Matt. Sastry, I'm going to unmute you, and I'm going to lower your hand. Did you do the reading?
I did do the reading.
Oh, that's perfect. Great. So we're going to talk to Sastry here. And so anyway, this is a great way for us to have that conversation. I'll mute, and again, what I can do is just go back and mute all, and we can go back to having the conversation. So this is a great way to identify people. Again, I would have this window open so you can be aware of who's raising their hand. Now, if you have a TA in the class, they might be the one to kind of monitor things. And so what you could do is you could actually close your participant window and close your chat window, because they could become a distraction. If you have a TA in there with you, tell the TA to open participant and chat window, and then you just have this view. And you're just talking away to the students, and they can, chat to you and say, hey, somebody just raised their hand. So it's up to you to decide what's the, do you want to have chat and participant open or not? Now, the one other option too is that because everybody's muted here, if it's a small enough group, if it's a group of 20 people or something, you can fit about 25 people on a screen. Depends on the screen resolution, the size of your screen. But if I have a group like this, I might just go with the physical hand raising. So, Maddie, do you have a question? You could raise your hand, right? Oh, perfect. And so I don't have the participant menu open. I don't have the chat window open. But what I'll do is right here on top of Maddie's face is I've got these options to unmute her. I can actually remove her from the meeting. I can put her back in the waiting room, it looks like. So I can actually remove her and make her wait, which is that's actually a super great feature to check out. But play around with this. You might learn how to, as I dive into this more and more, I'm just learning more and more. But I'm going to unmute this. Hey, Maddie, can you say a few words and say hi?
Hi, I have tons of questions.
Perfect. See? So this might be the model that you want to do to have a discussion. So if it's a small group, maybe you consider, doing that. I'm going to mute Maddie again. Do you want to have people raising their hands like this? That might work fine. If people aren't comfortable on the camera, maybe you just say, look, you can raise your hand digitally. At the end of the day, I think you and your TA need to get together, come up with a game plan. And when I say you, I mean you teachers need to come up with a game plan with your TA. If the TA is going to be attending classes, they can help you manage questions and hand raising. Decide whether or not you want to have the participant window or the chat window open while you're having a discussion. Decide if you want to have them digitally raise their hands or have them raise their hands through the camera. I think that it's going to depend on the size of your class and whether or not you have a TA. Those are the things to consider. If you don't have a TA, then I would say you're probably better off keeping the chat and the participant window open and having that discussion there using some of the digital hand raising. The other thing to make note of is that they do have the ability to go through and react. I have personally tested these out in my class before we did the closure, and I have found that students are not as vocal with these things. They might start playing around with them. Like, for example, Matt may accidentally do a thumbs down. Maddie, might start giving me applause because she thinks I am just so amazing. Let's see. Can you find the more, Maddie? See if you can find applause. No. Can you find the yes? There we go. Sastri found it. So this might be an opportunity. And so let me do this for actually, I'm going to give you one more tip here on class discussions. I'm going to clear all. Can everybody see by show of hands or nodding of heads, can you see the yes-no reaction under the participant window? So if you do see that, go ahead and click yes and let me know. Now, what you'll see here is that this is a nice, simple way to do a quick poll with everybody and say, hey, real quick, how many, agree or disagree with this? Do you think that we should go ahead and bring back and start spring break instead of extending it for 2 weeks? Should we just only do it for 1 week and bring back classes early? Yes or no? Go ahead and vote. So it looks like everybody's not on board with that, right? It looks like everybody's kind of pushing more towards the no, let's go ahead and have a 2-week break. How many are excited about, getting caught up on your sleep? Yes or no? Right? So it's a real good opportunity to be like, oh, it looks like 75% of people agree with this, but for me, I'm not excited about it, right? So this is like a really quick way to gauge. And if I want to clear that, I can just hit the clear all. So I feel like that's a lot of information that we just gone through in terms of how to conduct a group discussion. Things to consider are, do you have a TA or not? And if they do have a TA, what role do they have? And how does that change the way that you set up your view? If you don't have a TA, consider probably keeping the participant and the chat window open. I would consider making sure by default people are muted upon entry. If you don't remember to do that, just remember that under the participant window, you can mute all people, and then you can decide whether or not you will allow them to unmute themselves. If it's a very, very large class of over 300 people, I would probably say I'm not going to allow that. So real quick, can anybody unmute themselves? That's right. I have the control. So this is the way that I think you can things that consider as you are looking at how you manage a group discussion in your classroom. I'll stop there and hope that was helpful.